Hello, I am Raymond Shadow. Imagine this, friends. This is an ordinary Thursday night. You just got home from work. You collapse onto the sofa. The light from your phone screen illuminates your face. You open a food delivery app. Dozens of restaurants and hundreds of set meals are laid out before you. Or perhaps you open a video streaming site. Thousands of movies and series are yours to choose from. In this very moment, have you ever suddenly felt an inexplicable palpitation? A tiny, almost imperceptible sense of nausea. It's not because you have no choices. Quite the opposite. It is because there are too many choices. You realize that tonight's time belongs entirely to you. You can read, you can work out, you can study. You can also doom scroll through short videos for 3 hours until you pass out. No one is holding a gun to your head forcing you to make a decision. Except yourself. The anxiety of this moment is not because life is too hard. It is because you realize you possess the absolute freedom to screw up this night. This overwhelming sense of being lost in infinite possibilities. This psychological pressure that feels like freedom but makes you want to escape is the true cliff for us modern people. This is the starting point of our journey today. Let us dive deep into this philosophical exploration of self, anxiety, and redemption. If we are to discuss individual moral progress and our place in the long river of history, historians and philosophers often disagree. Especially when we look at the thoughts of Karl Marx. There is no unified conclusion regarding how Marx viewed the relationship between the individual and moral progress. This is indeed a bit regrettable. But the good news is, as philosophy enthusiasts, we don't need to be like historians, having to obsess over the identity of a certain thinker. For us, the value of a philosophical concept lies in the thought itself. As long as a certain interpretation can generate a novel chain of thought and allow us to reflect on assumptions that may exist in our thinking, then it has fulfilled its mission. Let's first look at a common interpretation of Marx, how he views personal moral progress. We all know that famous quote, "Religion is the opium of the people." But this only tells us half the story, because religion is just one catalyst for individual moral progress. If someone tells me religion is opium, I would assume they definitely have something else that can better promote moral progress. But Marx's position is much more interesting. In his view, when we talk about individual morality and the various forms it takes, these things actually don't matter in his worldview. Marx doesn't care what the individual is doing. This is very interesting, because for a long time, we have been told that we should view ourselves as independent moral agents. We have a responsibility to think about our own values and strive to become the best embodiment of these values. But Marx says this is not only a waste of time, it is essentially an illusion that has been instilled in our minds for thousands of years. This sounds a bit like Socrates in the opening of the Republic in his dialogue with Thrasymachus. Thrasymachus says justice is nothing but the interest of the stronger, a mechanism for the powerful to control the weak. Marx tells us to stop thinking about the individual. The only thing that matters in this world is that dialectical process of historical change. It is the moral progress of society towards an ultimate goal. For Hegel, this endpoint is the spirit's complete understanding of itself. But Marx disagrees. He believes the ultimate goal of the dialectical process is the ideal society. Many people claim to possess firm personal moral convictions. But Marx believes these so-called convictions are ultimately just byproducts of the cultural values of the time you were born into. In other words, we shouldn't view ourselves as independent moral agents, but should think about our relationship with the process of historical change. But on May 5, 1813, a unique figure was born. He would likely vehemently oppose Marx's view on the individual. His name was Søren Kierkegaard. If he were to respond to Marx, he might say this: "Okay, Marx, I understand the historical process you speak of. I also understand the point you are emphasizing. But please answer me. The changes in government, culture, or other institutions you speak of, this so-called historical process of yours, what exactly is it composed of? I will tell you what it is. It is the collection of countless individual choices. It is the sum of countless individual existences. To understand Kierkegaard's position, we need to understand the era he lived in. Kierkegaard was born in 1813. This meant he came of age right at the dawn of the era of mass communication. The telegraph and telephone were invented one after another. Railroads of the industrial age allowed newspapers and periodicals to spread rapidly everywhere. Kierkegaard lived in this world. He saw the writing on the wall before the writing even appeared. He believed that in this coming world, most people would no longer be individuals acting based on personality, but would turn into a crowd of faceless spectators. Even the people doing things were just worker bees in a sea of spectators. He foresaw that in the future, more people would live a vicarious life by watching others do things, rather than acting themselves. Imagine a giant Roman Colosseum, packed with people. In the middle are all the people in the world actually doing real things. Running for office, starting companies, acting in award-winning movies. And surrounding them is a massive stadium, packed with a passively watching crowd. For Kierkegaard, these spectators have lost a part of their self. For this reason, in his eyes, they are not true individuals. This sounds harsh, but also very interesting. If you walked into the crowd and asked everyone, "Do you think you are an individual?" they would say unequivocally, "Yes, of course I am an individual. I have a car. I have my own clothes. I have a job. I even have my own social security number. So I'm an individual." So what exactly went wrong? Why doesn't Kierkegaard give them this title? Why say they haven't become individuals as much as possible? Kierkegaard talked a lot, but we need to focus on two main traps. He believes people usually fall prey to these two traps, thereby ceasing to be individuals, thereby losing a part of their self. He says one thing people often do is losing themselves in the infinite. What does this mean? Losing oneself in the infinite is being in a state of analysis paralysis. He has a famous quote: "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom." We live in a world that seemingly possesses infinite possibilities. When we find ourselves at a decision point, we are often overwhelmed by countless possible choices. The strategy many people use to alleviate this overwhelming feeling is to not make a decision. They just sit there, at that decision point, forever weighing their options, yet never taking actual action. Let's take an example. Imagine an 18-year-old, just graduated from high school, finding themselves at a wonderful moment in life, must decide what to do with the rest of their life. In that moment, an endless field of possibilities lies ahead. Should I become a geologist or meteorologist? Should I study business or law? What a huge decision. Every choice has pros and cons, but I just don't know what I want to do. If they don't make a decision, the result is often this: "Okay, I'll go to college first, but I'll just take general education courses. This buys me enough time. Let me figure out what I want to do." This sounds reasonable. 6 months later, grandma calls and asks, "Have you decided what to study?" "No, grandma. I'm still hesitating between geology, meteorology, and business." If Kierkegaard saw this scene, he would say, "What are you doing? This is not an individual. This is a person who thinks they are an individual, but they are lost in the infinite." Honestly, you could sit there, having the exact same conversation with yourself for the rest of your life. When do you plan to make a decision and take action? By the way, how do you think that decision will ultimately come about? Will it just suddenly descend one day? Will you suddenly collapse on the floor of a gas station, convulsing, and then a vision of yourself becoming a meteorologist appears in your mind? No. Someday you need to truly consider the possibilities and make the best decision for that moment. You are just prolonging the process. As long as you are in this liminal state, as long as you don't act on the decision you think is best, you may possess the capacity to represent your own free action. You may indeed be autonomous. But if you never use it, if you never use this capacity for free action, you are lost in the infinite, thinking about endless possibilities. In reality, you have lost the ability to act freely. You are paralyzed. You have lost a part of yourself in the infinite. This applies to every choice we make. What job to take, who to marry, even what diet to choose. It is easy for us to get lost in the infinite. And in Kierkegaard's view, the other side of the coin, the other common trap people fall prey to, is called losing oneself in the finite. As we can imagine, this is like the other extreme. Losing oneself in the finite means not considering enough possibilities, just yielding to temptation, blindly conforming to social customs, culture, or the expectations of others. This is a particularly scary trap, because most people who lose their self in the finite have a harder time realizing they are doing so than those who lose themselves in the infinite. For these people, they view everything they do as their own choice. Imagine a cow. When a cow follows the herd, wherever the herd goes, to that cow, it very likely feels like it is making its own choices. The cow's synapses are firing, telling its little hooves to cross the pasture. But this cow is not acting freely. It is always subject to where the herd is going. It has simply disappeared into the crowd. Listening to this, you might find yourself leaning more towards one of these. But please don't misunderstand. These traps are not mutually exclusive. In Kierkegaard's view, you can lose a part of yourself in both at the same time, experiencing both extremes in the same life. I know a guy. Known him since middle school. Haven't spoken in years. During those years, he met a girl in his senior year of high school. He said they fell in love immediately. Became the high school sweethearts who were going to get married. They both went to college. Went to schools on opposite ends of the country, because that was the next step after high school. He went to school to become a music teacher, because that's what he told the guidance counselor he wanted to do in 9th grade. He lived that college party life, because he saw in movies that's what you do in college. They both graduated. The girl moved in with him. They got married and had kids. Then one day it all fell apart. Later he told me, everything he did in the past 5 years was strictly a lie. Apparently, he only did those things because his parents, society, and everyone on Facebook told him, this is what you should do after high school. He lost 5 years of individuality in the finite. In Kierkegaard's eyes, he was not an individual. He just conformed to this social paradigm, living himself into a mold. So they divorced and he moved back to his parents' house. Now working at a fast food restaurant, smoking weed every day. If you talk to him now, he has all sorts of great ideas about where to go next. Maybe he'll start his own business. Maybe he'll go back to school. Maybe he'll move to try and see the kids more. These are all great next steps. if this is what he said on day one and took action. But as he has the same conversation with himself day after day, month after month, eventually, he lost a part of his self in the infinite. The only way to stop thinking about endless possibilities and actually make a decision is to do what Kierkegaard considers the purest rational act you can do. That is to take a leap of faith. Now we arrive at the most crucial moment. This concept might encounter huge resistance. I know many of you might say, "Okay, Kierkegaard, but there's a problem. I believe that the things I do are not based on what I want to believe is true, but because I think that is what is closest to the truth. How can I arbitrarily agree to believe something just because I choose to believe, especially regarding such a serious question as the nature of existence?" This sounds too irrational. But what Kierkegaard is saying here is actually far more profound than this. First of all, yes, Kierkegaard was a Christian. Yes, this is his defense for why you should make a leap of faith into Christianity. But that is a separate matter. If you look at Kierkegaard and compare him to every other Christian you've met in your life, you will find he is a completely different creature. Not just different. He might even feel disgusted. Disgusted by the lazy and selfish way of practicing of every Christian he has seen. Kierkegaard's task in his early works was to find out what it means to be a true Christian. In this process, what surprised and frustrated him most was that he was blazing a trail no one had walked. He has a famous quote, "My task is so new that in the 1800 years of Christendom, there is literally no one to teach me how to do it." He compared himself to a wild goose. A wild goose trying to teach a flock of domesticated geese how to fly again. He wrote lengthy treatises on almost every aspect of Christianity, exploring how it had been distorted and ruined, exploring the desperate attempts people made to make it easier, more attractive, so that once people called themselves Christians, they wouldn't have to put in too much effort. Listen to what he says. Christendom has been spoiled by this nonsense. They think that Christian God is a decent, harmless fellow, a nice guy, especially the kind of friend who likes women bustling about and coaxing children. All human efforts tend to gather together. Let us unite. This, of course, happens under various noble-sounding names: love, compassion, enthusiasm, executing some grand plan, etc. This is just the usual hypocrisy of us scoundrels. But the truth is, in the crowd, we get rid of the standard of the individual. Thousands of people lived and then died. They were just numbers. Numbers became their horizon. That is to say, they were just copies. If you have criticisms of religion in today's world, considering we live in this empirical age, I think most people seeing these points raised by Kierkegaard would feel this is a strange angle of entry. Most people in today's world don't have a problem with religion in general. What they have a problem with is they think religion makes baseless claims about the nature of existence. Like there is a personal God making rules for you, or someone walked on water 2,000 years ago. Things like that. But Kierkegaard is kind of the opposite. He always said he doesn't care about the what of religion, but rather the how of religion. In other words, he doesn't think the goal of religion is to make some dogmatic declaration about objective truth, or this is how the world works, or this is how the world was created. No, Kierkegaard saw the only way for religion to exist is that it must have a human being as a vessel. The Bible to Kierkegaard is not an encyclopedia. Why would people think that? Humans are an unstoppable part of religion. The Bible is just a system for us to become the highest form of individuals. Kierkegaard didn't think Genesis was the most accurate description of how the universe was created. But the values given in the book, to him, were the best method for us to become true individual selves. So in this sense, religion is not the opium of the people, as Marx said. The function of religion is to organize a commitment to a specific way of life. But you know what? At this point, it is easy for us to get confused by all the biases we were brainwashed with growing up. Thinking of words like religion, God, Christianity. So let's strip away all the buzzwords. Let's do a thought experiment. Because I think the point Kierkegaard is making here is actually a very good point. It is a thought experiment I have done a few times in my life. It has always been extremely helpful to me, letting me start thinking about my behavior. I want us to do this right now. Let's all create our own religion right now. Really, take a pen and a piece of paper. Actually, preferably a pencil and paper. Because in this process, even in the coming years, you will be revising this religion. Now I want you to imagine. A billionaire walks up to you. Let's say Elon Musk walks up to you and says, "Okay, I need your help. You are uniquely qualified in this field. I want you to do this for me. I will give you $10 million for you to search the deepest parts of your brain. What I want you to do for me is write down the ultimate perfect recipe for success. From sunrise to sunset, write down. What specific actions does a person exactly need to do to achieve your current goals? Forget discipline, forget motivation. Write down a list of activities. If we could program someone to do these things, they would definitely achieve your current goals. What would that day look like? I don't know what you guys would do, but I would quote and reference every self-help book, every online video, every article. I would reference everything I've ever read. I would make this person rise at dawn. Of course, after 8 hours of sleep, they walk into the kitchen, grab a cup, fill it with warm filtered water, squeeze a lemon, maybe a clove of garlic and a pinch of salt, then drink it. Then they would sit cross-legged on the floor, do 30 minutes of breathing exercises, visualization and meditation, then go to the dunes and do intermittent sprints for a while. Then they go home, eat a breakfast perfectly balanced in macro and micronutrients, even though it actually tastes bad. But this is exactly what their body needs. All of this before they go to work. Do you see what I am doing? I'm searching my brain, looking for everything I've heard about morning routines, about the best way to start a new day, based on my current understanding of life. I am creating the ultimate morning routine. Now plan the same for the rest of the day. Pretend Elon Musk is standing in front of you, with $10 million in a briefcase. What you possess is a best practice guide to achieving goals. What you possess is an ultimate cheat sheet that follows your own advice. Isn't this the problem with most people? They know what they should do. They just can't find the motivation or necessary funds to actually do this every day. I know if I go to the dunes every day and do some hill sprints, my body would definitely be stronger. I just don't do it. I'd rather burn 300 calories on a treadmill or elliptical and be done with it. Similarly, I also know if I only eat leaves and drink rainwater, I would feel better and live longer, and all sorts of other benefits. But I just don't do it. I found a happy medium between that and eating pizza and ice cream every day. The point is most people know what to do. If someone asks for their advice, they can give a method better than what they actually do. So when Kierkegaard says, the value of religion lies in its commitment to a specific way of life, to piously execute this set of behaviors, swap Kierkegaard's Christianity with the personal religion you just created. You can start to see the value of religion in Kierkegaard's eyes. by taking a leap of faith, believing this is the best code of conduct you can hold yourself to. Although it is obviously not perfect, you will continue to read more books. You will do better experiments. You will learn more about yourself and life. You will make adjustments. But in that moment, by taking a leap of faith and committing to acting according to this religion of yours, you will avoid in the process losing a part of yourself in the finite or the infinite. You will truly live the best life you can live. This is why Kierkegaard believes faith is the ultimate act of reason. Because you can choose the kind of person you want to become, instead of potentially being paralyzed by that reasoning process. This is what is called a leap of faith. In a way, it is the most rational choice we must make. Now, this might sound a bit abstract, but let's bring it back to our daily emotions. Even if you understand all this, even if you wrote down the perfect religion on this paper, you still need to face that giant monster. Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. We will explore the meaning of this quote in depth. To understand the whole of it, I think it is necessary to look at another quote by Kierkegaard. This is written in a completely different work of his, to fit the modern context we are expressing. I paraphrased it slightly. It goes like this: the greatest danger you can face in life is losing yourself, and you don't even realize it. It is different in this respect, because everything else you lose, whether it's $5 or your wife or your phone, when you lose them, this is obvious to you. If you lost your phone, when you change into pajamas at night, you pat your pocket and realize in that moment, oh no, I left my phone at Applebee's. I have to go get it back. But when you lose yourself, the situation is different. When you lose yourself, you might go months, even years without realizing it. This is why it is a particularly insidious situation. You might not even realize you are in it. For Kierkegaard, most people living today, probably up to 90% of people alive, at any given time, are actually not true to themselves. Many people are lost. Many people find themselves either lost in the finite, attaching their identity to social customs, or lost in the infinite, stuck in a state of analysis paralysis over truly infinite possibilities. But they never truly act on one of them. Truly becoming a self requires you to realize, yes, I can do countless things, but it also requires you to actually make a choice and act on one of the things that aligns with your true identity. When we find ourselves in the balancing act between these two, between what Kierkegaard calls the finite and the infinite, we experience a state he calls dizziness. This dizziness is caused by the fact that we look at the sheer scale of possibilities we have to choose from, combined with the fact that we know ultimately we must choose one. As you can imagine, in this state, our minds are filled with all sorts of questions. We start to catastrophize. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm making a huge mistake? What if one morning I wake up as a 60-year-old retired admiral with a prosthetic limb and feel that everything I did was wrong? Isn't this the essence of anxiety? Worrying about future outcomes we actually have almost no control over. Kierkegaard says, anxiety can be compared with dizziness. He whose eye happens to look down into the yawning abyss becomes dizzy. But what is the reason for this? It is just as much in his own eye as in the abyss. Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. We want to clearly state this part of Kierkegaard's thought, at the risk of sounding redundant. He is saying anxiety is our reaction to this idea, the idea that we are free to choose from millions of options, but we ultimately must choose one and act. This is interesting. This freedom we possess. As fellow humans, you have to admit, It is both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, we are free. We can do whatever we want. Isn't that great? But on the other hand, wow, I can do anything. What if I make a mistake? When we have fewer choices rather than more. As humans, we seem happier. He gives the example of salad dressing in a grocery store. I imagine, if there were only 3 bottles of salad dressing in a grocery store, only 3 bottles to choose from. When you walk down the salad dressing aisle of the grocery store, let's say there is only ranch, blue cheese, and barbecue sauce. Not that anyone actually uses barbecue sauce as salad dressing. Imagine someone in the world actually uses barbecue sauce as salad dressing. They walk down this hypothetical aisle in the grocery store. They would be pleasantly surprised to find barbecue sauce. This is an easier choice than ranch and blue cheese. I choose barbecue sauce. But that is not the reality we live in. Good luck going to the salad dressing aisle today. You have barbecue flavor, spicy barbecue, honey barbecue, mesquite barbecue, low-fat barbecue, Louisiana barbecue. The point is, the more choices you have, the harder it is to make a decision. Also, the more likely you are to go home and pour Louisiana barbecue dressing on your salad. And think, maybe I should have bought the spicy barbecue sauce. It breeds dissatisfaction. Now back to Kierkegaard. We aren't talking about salad dressing here. We are talking about your life. We aren't talking about 10 choices in a grocery store. We are talking about virtually infinite choices. No wonder he says when we find ourselves in this strange liminal state between freedom being really good for us and really bad for us, we might feel a little uncomfortable in that place. In fact, we might feel very uncomfortable. This emotional state is a state he repeatedly mentions, called dread. Everyone who woke up this morning didn't say to themselves, "You know what? Let's be in a state of dread today." Yeah, that sounds good. No, dread is terrible. How could anyone think dread is good? Dread is painful. If we speak merely statistically, what do most humans do when they find themselves in extremely uncomfortable situations? Like dread, they flee from it, right? They find a way to escape. This is why many people don't exercise. This is why many people don't have difficult but necessary conversations with people. This is also why most people desperately look for some way to avoid this hard path of becoming a self. I like to think of this process as walking down a staircase. We start at the top, completely lost in the infinite or the finite. Once we are about to realize this, we take a step down the stairs, entering a state of dread. Once we find ourselves in that uncomfortable situation, we take another step down the stairs, entering a state Kierkegaard calls despair. This is the level where most people spend their lives. It is also what we want to focus on dissecting in the next part. Despair stems from the attempt to get rid of the self. Please think about this carefully, because at the bottom of this staircase, waiting for us is not just darkness, but a disease you never perceived, a sickness of the spirit. Kierkegaard calls despair the sickness unto death. It is a disease of the spirit. I want to make a quick note on this point. Maybe you believe there is an invisible soul inhabiting your body. It is responsible for your emotional state and various other things. But for the rest of you, those godless monsters, those simply treading water on this planet, until inevitably falling into the seventh circle of hell's chain gang. For the rest of you, the word spirit doesn't have to make you feel alienated. We want to understand spirit in the context of daily conversation. You know, like I'm in low spirits today. Think of this spiritual disease Kierkegaard talks about as a condition tormenting your emotional state. He uses the word disease. This is really how Kierkegaard views the state of despair. like a disease lurking within you. Actually not lurking, but an asymptomatic disease. But it is always quietly present within your body, waiting to strike. It's like spiritual herpes. We can relate it to any other undiagnosed illness. If you don't get regular checkups, or take inventory of your body every once in a while, one day you might suddenly collapse on the floor and find out you've been living with cancer for the past 9 months. Without any symptoms, you might discover this disease has been causing massive damage to your body, and you didn't even realize it. For Kierkegaard, despair is the same. Because when you are in a state of despair, it's not that you necessarily look like a 7-year-old, pouting all day because you didn't get Christmas presents. No, you can be in a state of despair, while looking like the happiest person in the world. But deep inside you, there is still a hole of despair, waiting to rear its ugly head. If despair is a disease, then the problem lies in diagnosing this disease. Not only do people suffering from it often not know they are victims, but remember, despair is the next step down the stairs we took to escape that state of dread. People escape that feeling of dread in thousands of different ways. You wouldn't even know where to start looking for despair. Kierkegaard has a great quote. This quote has been imprinted in my mind for years. He says most people are subjective towards themselves and objective towards everyone else. Sometimes terribly objective. But the task is precisely to be objective towards oneself and subjective towards everyone else. The problem lies in having enough self-awareness and being honest enough with yourself to realize which type of despair you have fallen into, to try and avoid that state of dizziness brought by anxiety and dread. Now we can't possibly have time to review all the different types of despair. But the kind of despair Kierkegaard saw the most, the kind he thinks people are most prone to falling into, is what he calls despair over the earthly. We have all seen this before. Essentially, it is confusing your identity or self-worth with something earthly outside of yourself, something over which you actually have no control. I could go on forever about how Kierkegaard describes this, but the best way to help you understand his meaning is probably to give some examples. Suppose you come of age in the world, read some books by Kierkegaard. You realize you are lost in the finite. You walk down the stairs, enter a state of anxiety and dread. You flee from it. You walk down the next step of the stairs, finding yourself in a state of despair. When you are in a state of despair, you should feel intense anxiety. But to distract yourself, to escape the arduous task of becoming a true self and dealing with that anxiety, suppose you dedicate a huge part of your life to swimming. Suppose you call yourself a swimmer. Suppose you go to the pool to swim every day. Suppose you identify with the activity of swimming so much that you find yourself saying things like, "Oh my God, if I had an accident, and for some reason I couldn't swim anymore, what would I be then? I am a swimmer. If I can't swim, I will be nothing. That is me. I might commit suicide." Now fast forward a bit. Suppose you encounter a terrible accident at the zoo. Suppose an elephant has a seizure and falls on your leg. Your leg is crushed beyond repair. The doctor requires amputation. For the sake of this example, suppose you can never swim again. How would you feel in that moment? You might feel your life is over. Like a big chunk of your life has been taken away. Taken away by that epileptic elephant. You might feel empty inside. But Kierkegaard would say, that emptiness you feel now was actually always there. You were just distracting yourself all along. By attaching yourself to this earthly activity and toning it into your identity to escape the various tasks of being true to yourself. This has echoes of Buddhism. and echoes of an episode we did the other day about Kant's view on what enlightenment is. It is too easy to outsource your understanding of a specific subject to a book. Then when mentioning it in conversation, just parrot a few lines from that book, pretending you are an expert. It is too easy to outsource your morality to a priest, or outsource your diet to a diet guru on some website. What Kierkegaard is saying here is, even outsourcing what kind of individual we are going to be, our values, our priorities, everything that makes you you. This is also a very attractive concept. But if we outsource it to swimming or hiking or ping pong or whatever, that isn't necessarily you. You might just be utilizing these things to escape the process, to escape the discomfort of the state of despair. Another interesting point, another thing that might keep us in this state of despair, Kierkegaard says, longer than we have to be, is the transient nature of things we cannot control. Take an example. Someone loves their significant other very much. That is the love of their life. They cannot imagine life without them. They cannot go on if they cannot live with them. If they find this person met some tragic death in life, they would say, I will hold this dagger of cold steel smiling and plunge it deep into my chest to feel something one last time. Yes, this is another example of someone escaping the process of becoming a true individual. But imagine they didn't die. Imagine things went well for a while. You feel whole inside, but then you broke up over something. You feel pain. You feel empty inside, but then you got back together. You feel great again. You feel whole, but then you broke up again. You feel empty. Kierkegaard would say, that emptiness you feel is inside you during both the good times and the bad. You just didn't notice it during the good times. Becoming a true self requires you to be honest and battle the anxiety and emptiness within, instead of fleeing from it. This is actually kind of funny. Many of us spend a massive amount of energy trying to never have to deal with this anxiety that comes with becoming a true self. Whereas in reality, at least for Kierkegaard, feeling intense anxiety means you are on the right path to becoming a self. Think about this staircase we have been walking down this whole process. What is the meaning of these different steps? It is to get rid of anxiety, right? When you find yourself needing to choose from countless options and act on one of them, the anxiety you face. We have been escaping this anxiety all along, but Kierkegaard believes we should embrace it. This is an indispensable part of being human. Ironically, although anxiety usually has a negative connotation, the more intense the anxiety you feel about making this choice, the closer you likely are to reaching your true self. Instead of just outsourcing your life to some culture you can't control, or some person you can't control, or whatever you are doing, embrace your freedom. Kierkegaard views this process of becoming an individual as a baptism of fire. Yes, you will experience anxiety. Yes, you will experience dread, and all these temporary feelings. But just like the discomfort you feel when lifting weights at the gym, that adversity is the catalyst for growth. For Kierkegaard, this is the most important thing you can do in your life. I know this isn't some revolutionary concept for you guys, but I have always viewed going for a run or lifting weights at the gym this way. It is directly analogous to life itself. Similarly, you will encounter resistance. You don't want to do it. You want to quit, but you persevered in the gym. Life will also give you resistance. Life will give you things you don't want to do. I think because of that training, when you face adversity in life, you are much less likely to quit. Now some of you might be at home saying, look, I'm already an individual. I have figured it out. I don't follow anyone's rules. not even my own rules. I don't outsource myself. In fact, this whole process sounds easy. I can knock it out in a weekend. Who is this Kierkegaard? Talking as if he is enlightened. Oh, I am a self. Look at me. Listen. If that is your internal monologue, I would implore you not to underestimate how hard this is. In fact, Kierkegaard wrote extensively about how difficult it was for him to be an individual even after he fully understood the process of becoming one. He said, "What I really lack is to be clear in my mind what I am to do, not what I am to know. The thing is to find a purpose, to find a truth which is truth for me, to find the idea for which I am willing to live and die. This is what my soul thirsts for, as the African desert thirsts for water." Listen to this sentence. A truth which is truth for me. In the age we live in, this seems strange. Kierkegaard revealed something in philosophy, something that up to this point in history had largely been unexplored. In philosophy for so long, we have been dedicated to trying to use reason or our senses to try and find some objective truth about this universe we live in, arguing all the way about what is the most reliable method to do so. But as we learned in many past episodes, since ancient times, no matter how smart a person tries to undertake this task, objective truth is just a very slippery thing. Not only do we not know if it is possible to obtain, but would we know truth if we sought it? Would it bring us any form of enlightenment regarding what it means to be human? The reason Kierkegaard did so much work, talking about things like the process of how we make choices, or the importance of acting on these choices, or that we need to embrace the freedom of will we all possess. The reason he talks so much about this is because he rejected the concept Hegel had just proposed, that ultimately our choices are just byproducts of the framework of that historical change process we happen to be born into. Kierkegaard is trying to prove here that the choices we make are free choices. We need to be vigilant, take inventory of ourselves, because these choices are our responsibility, not the manifestation of something out of our control. As Kierkegaard said, what is Hegel's process of historical change, other than the collection of billions of individual subjective existences? This fired the first shot, fired at a target that would eventually be called existentialism. This is why Kierkegaard is called the father of existentialism. However, faced with this endless anxiety and responsibility, how should we look for that truth which is truth for me, outside the noisy realm of human concern? Kierkegaard points us to two unexpected teachers. They neither speak nor think, yet hold our long-lost secrets. The names of these two teachers form the title of a book we are going to discuss today: The Lily of the Field and the Bird of the Air. Some of you might be thinking, I know because I used to think so too. What can I learn from a flower and the loudest damn animal on earth? I'm not a flower. By the way, Kierkegaard would agree, you are not a flower. This is genius philosophy, I know. But let's start here. You are definitely a human. Your life is filled with some kind of despair, and a melancholy that flowers couldn't even imagine. But between your existence and the existence of flowers or birds, there are indeed some commonalities. This is a part of your existence, and a part that is very easy to forget and overlook. To understand why it is so easy to overlook, let's talk about the other part of human existence, where we spend almost all of our daily lives. That is some way existing in our heads. That is a realm of representation, or what Kierkegaard calls the realm of human concern. We are all very familiar with this realm of human concern, but there are a few important things to point out. First and foremost, the realm of human concern is a realm of time. Past, present, future. These are terms we usually use to describe the daily reality in our heads. We all use timestamps. The conclusion drawn from this is, most things we mention in daily life do not exist in the ontology of the present moment. That is to say, the realm of human concern is primarily a realm of abstraction. We use placeholder terms, like summer or last week, to describe things that have not happened or no longer exist. We do this because these abstract concepts are very useful in guiding our lives. And at this point, the natural result that follows is that the whole concept of comparison starts to become relevant. Comparing oneself with others. Comparing things with things. Suddenly, this behavior becomes very useful because we need to be able to understand ourselves, understand our place on this plane of past, present, and future. And so it happens. Human life largely becomes regulated by comparison. Following this are various other temporal considerations. Temptation, worry, regret, analysis, etc. Considering this, probably everyone listening to this show lives almost entirely in this abstract realm. This realm not rooted in the present, yet it constitutes almost everything we call reality. This is the realm of human concern. Kierkegaard might ask this person, once you come up with a plan, once you have a set of values, you can strive to get closer to your true self. Kierkegaard might call it in his language a spiritual quest. Once you reach that point, would you say that is the entirety of your existence? Would you say that is 100% of you? Are you merely a set of projects to be executed, just for a set of values you proposed? Or is it that there is an undeniable part of your existence, existing outside that realm? Let me be clear. Kierkegaard doesn't think meaning is created, but he would undoubtedly support someone engaging in this exercise. He might offer some insights to this person, saying something like this. This is well done. Undoubtedly, a part of your ontological makeup is located in that realm of human concern. But there is another part of your ontological makeup, located outside that realm, without any interiority. Developing an understanding of this part of your existence will undoubtedly teach you some skills. These skills will help you when you go to fulfill all the wishes and projects in your life, whether Christian or not. This is part of what Jesus told the people when speaking on the Mount. Whether flower or not, this is what the lily can teach you about what it means to be a human. An atheist can learn from a flower in the Bible. This seems silly, but the lily of the field and the bird of the air, in this context, can be our great teachers, because they exist completely on a plane of existence outside this realm of human concern. We can see a part of ourselves in them. Otherwise, this part might remain hidden. So what exactly does this plane of existence outside the realm of human concern look like? Or better question might be, where can we find this part of ourselves? Kierkegaard might begin to answer this question. He points out, when Jesus told his followers about the lily of the field and the bird of the air, he sent them out into the wild to find them. What does that mean? For a secular-minded person, like the protagonist of our story, Kierkegaard might ask, what is the modern secular version of going into the wild to find a part of oneself? This sounds a lot like what people do when talking about going for a walk in nature or hiking. Now, first of all, maybe it should be said here that this is obviously an incredibly stupid way to talk about nature. I mean, nature walk. Are you going on a pilgrimage to nature? Wait a minute, so birds building nests is nature. But man-made buildings and cities aren't nature. No, you are nature when you drive to the trail for a nature walk. There is no sign saying now entering nature. This is an important point, because the value people get from so-called nature walks, Kierkegaard would say, is probably more about moving away from this realm in our heads, from the realm of human concern to which we were originally sentenced to life imprisonment. This is the real benefit of a nature walk. When they move away from this realm full of desires and projects, they start to feel connected to something else. They will use many different ways to describe this something else, depending on the language they use. They might say they feel connected to something greater than themselves, to the universe, to nature, to God, to the ground of our existence. Whatever guarantees the continuity of existence in every moment. There are many different ways to think about it, but whatever term the individual uses to describe their experience here, it is a universal human experience. The question we want to ask is, what is that thing they connect to outside the realm of human concern? Call it what you will, but Kierkegaard calls it being closer to the kingdom of God on this hypothetical nature walk of ours. Although for Kierkegaard this can be found anywhere. On this nature walk, we move from the time realm of human concern to something more like an eternal present. When we take a second, stop thinking about our projects in life, return to this immediacy. Think about the lily you might encounter on these walks. Consider the lily of the field, never trying to be something it is not. It just exists in its environment. It doesn't aspire to be anything other than itself. It doesn't compare itself to other lilies. It doesn't make plans to bloom in the summer. The bird of the air has no 5-year plan, nor a vision board to look at every day. It doesn't compare its life to the life of a domesticated bird. The lily and the bird don't sit there, reflecting on things that may or may not happen to them. Because of this, they are far away from the noisy chaos of that realm of human concern. Noise is sometimes a good way to describe the realm of human concern. Chatter, meaningless talk. These are different ways people express it. What do lilies possess on a nature walk that we, serving a life sentence in the realm of human concern and projects, do not? What is the antidote to noise? It is silence. Kierkegaard's work, The Lily of the Field and the Bird of the Air, is divided into 3 separate discourses. Each discourse corresponds to 3 stages of life he thinks people might experience. Each explores a different skill we can learn from the lily and the bird. The skill embodied in the first discourse of the book. One thing we can learn from the existence of the lily and the bird is the value of silence. Now it should be said, at the core of these 3 discourses, there is an implication that due to the way we are created as humans, we are prone to certain behaviors that sometimes cause us problems, especially when executing the value system we have been creating. Each discourse offers a skill we should practice if we want to avoid common traps that prevent us from executing our value system. Again, the first one is the value of silence, because by default, it seems, humans seem prone to noise, sitting in this abstract place in our heads, comparing things, worrying about things, regretting things. We ruminate on things we hope will happen. We ruminate on things we hope won't happen. We make plans to make these things happen, or not happen. We doubt our plans. We doubt our values. We doubt ourselves. But for Kierkegaard, all these desires, struggles, comparisons, strategies, we want to give credit where credit is due. All these things are absolutely part of our lives. They absolutely give us real advantages as humans. But he would say sometimes, when it comes to executing the value system you have committed to, Sometimes the best skill you can have has nothing to do with thinking. In fact, quite the opposite. Sometimes the best skill you can have is the ability to shut off your brain. Shut off this realm of human concern and be silent for a while. People will undoubtedly compare this to living in the moment. Mindfulness meditation, taming the monkey mind. This would be a very contemplative, modern scientific way of talking about these universal human experiences. If that is the language you want to use in this discussion, that is totally fine. But understand that reducing what Kierkegaard is saying here merely to that description will miss some very cool things he adds. Let me start here. You might be attracted to shows like this because you consider yourself a thinker. People around you might tell you, you overthink things. I'll think too much. You probably spent too much time in this realm of representation and human concern. By the way, you spent so much time in that place because you are good at comparing things and identifying patterns. That is what helped you survive as a smart person until now. No wonder you gravitate towards that realm. Kierkegaard would say the problem is, once you have carefully crafted a set of values and a set of projects to establish them, you stay in your head, eventually sabotaging your own efforts. Lost in the infinite, lost in the noise, lost in talking about yourself, giving up your values. Let's talk a bit more about the noise in this realm of human concern. In the first discourse, Kierkegaard takes issue with the archetype of the poet. For Kierkegaard, the typical poet uses beautiful prose to convey the beauty of God's kingdom to people. You know, like rain, my soul lulls the animals to sleep. Following that, on the opposite riverbank, in the eyes of the sparrow, I witness the infinite. You know, on one hand, beautiful rhetoric. I mean, obviously very talented. But on the other hand, what exactly are we talking about? Who actually thinks in these words? Who would identify with someone talking like that? This bothers Kierkegaard, not because he doesn't like poetry, but because this is clearly someone insincerely trying to convey a relationship with God's kingdom through a bunch of fancy rhetoric. This might ultimately do more harm than good. Like Nietzsche, Kierkegaard was frustrated with the church of his time. According to him, there were many people there who would otherwise be devout Christians, but they felt completely alienated by the whole process. And the poet, though well-intentioned, seemed to only make things worse when describing God's kingdom. For every person they inspired, how many felt lonely and afraid because they just couldn't see God's kingdom in these glowing, poetic terms. Using modern secular language, I can give a million examples, but think about motivational figures on the internet. Similar to the poet, their intentions are good. They want to inspire people to live out their values. Their days are simple. They wake up, they post the obligatory post on Instagram. The sun rises. They talk about their day, heralding the glory of the kingdom of their lives. Gratitude. Grinding for another day towards their goals. Being stuck in traffic today is a privilege. Passing out at the gym today is a privilege. The paramedics' worry is just weakness leaving their body. We all know these people. To their credit, these people, in the Nietzschean sense, are absolutely desiring to strive and establishing their values in the world. But for every person they inspire to abide by their values, how many people look at one of these motivational figures, feel inspired for about 3 days, then feel maybe they just aren't cut out for this life? Because when it comes to their own internal experience, they don't seem to feel anything like this inspired poet. Kierkegaard might also say here, How many times do you really need to hear work hard? How many times must someone tell you to be process-oriented or to reach for the stars? How long before this whole process starts to sound like noise? The poet in the first discourse represents someone with a false connection to God masked by a bunch of beautiful words, whereas in reality, that is endless chatter and noise. Silence is the answer to this noise. This is how you gain true connection. To connect to the ground of our existence. Not speaking but listening. Kierkegaard believes once we reach a certain point, we all generally know what we should do in life. Meaning if you are a bad person, it's not because you haven't encountered the right ethics book. It's not a cognitive awareness thing. Like, I should plan for my future. I never thought of that before. No, obviously that is not the problem. Obviously, you know what you should do. When it comes to actually executing your value system every day, motivational speakers and poets and everyone like them, Kierkegaard thinks the problem isn't that you haven't found the right person to convince you to do this every day. The problem is you keep convincing yourself in your head not to do it. You are very good at this in your realm of human concern. You are comfortable up there. So, when you choose a difficult spiritual path based on a set of values, an inevitable doubt starts to creep in. You indulge yourself and engage in a debate about whether this is really you. Are these really my values? Then because you are good at arguing anyway, and because there is no objective answer about why you should do any of this, once again, inevitably, you convince yourself not to do it. At least not today. I'll start tomorrow. I'll start next week. For Kierkegaard, this is all noise. We can learn something from the lily and the bird. He says, the silent bird frees itself from what makes the suffering heavier, from a misunderstood sympathy of others, frees itself from what makes the suffering last longer, from all the talk about suffering, frees itself from what makes the suffering into something worse than suffering, from the sin of impatience and sadness. Silence for Kierkegaard is a form of prayer. For him, prayer is not about talking to some old man sitting in the sky. Prayer is a practice. Its sole intention is to change the heart of the one praying. Through silence, by moving away from that noise of constant human concern. Through silence, we are reminded of the spiritual quest we have committed to, the set of values we created, what truly matters. For Kierkegaard, if simply talking about skills to possess, silence. This will help you do everything you want to do in this world. Probably one of the most important ones. Another way to think about it is there is a time for reflection, and there is a time for action. Spend the time you want to spend strategizing, reflecting on how you want to live your life. Commit to a contract of whatever length you want to commit to. Can be a day, a year, or the rest of your life. But once you commit, the time for reflection is over. At that point, you are no longer the general. Now you are the soldier executing orders. In many ways, when you are a soldier, not questioning orders, not thinking too much about what you are doing, is a strength to possess. If the first discourse teaches us the value of silence, solving the problem of humans tending to chatter a bit too much noise in this realm of human concern, then in the second discourse, Kierkegaard writes about another skill that we can learn from the lily and the bird. That is the value of obedience. Why would obedience be important when executing our value system? Just like we humans tend to talk too much, we also tend to change our minds or become corrupt. This comes from Like many other existentialists, Kierkegaard believes our lives as individuals are in a constant state of becoming. This is part of our nature as humans, being in a constant state of change. We never stand still in terms of identity. So when you decide to commit to a value system, part of the reason it is hard to stick to it is because your nature is fighting against you. We easily lose focus. We easily consider other options, because that is also what we do as humans. Again, we are very good at this. We are good at changing and adapting. Committing to a path and sticking to it is not a naturally occurring phenomenon. In humans, if it were, we wouldn't respect it so much when we see others doing it. However, Kierkegaard would say, in our teachers today, it is naturally occurring. The lily of the field and the bird of the air. The lily and the bird do not complain, no matter what situation they find themselves in, no matter how bad things get for them. Never did they even consider doing something different from the path they are currently on. Temptation is an important point here. Kierkegaard says, where you find a lack of obedience, you will also find temptation. When you commit to something, like a set of values, yielding to temptation, lowering the standard for yourself, triggers a toxic domino effect. For you, this is by no means a good thing. The best example I can think of, I know there are others out there like this. For the sake of my self-esteem, I hope almost everyone is like this. But it reminds me of waking up in the morning. Suppose you find a new job. Starts at 7:30 in the morning. You make a commitment to your new workplace, to this group of people, that you will show up on time every day. To do this, you decide you must wake up at 5 a.m. every day. It goes well for a while. Then one day you wake up super tired. You decide to yield to temptation. Hit the snooze button. What's the big deal? I mean, what is 9 minutes? You tell yourself. Go to work. Everything is fine, and then you get back on track. But a few weeks later, you wake up tired again. Kierkegaard would ask, how easy is it for you to hit the snooze alarm again? Since 2 weeks ago, you already lowered the standard for yourself. Not only that, how easy is it for this one snooze button to turn into 5 snooze buttons? How easy is it for this to become your new normal? The point is, value systems don't collapse in a day, or even in a week. It is a gradual, insidious process of tiny violations. They add up, becoming habits, until one day, you look at yourself in the mirror and no longer like what you see. When you commit to a value system, you exist as a constantly changing being, in a continuous state of becoming. This will introduce temptation. When it happens, Kierkegaard says, we better learn from the lily and the bird, the skill of obedience. It is time to stop bargaining. It is time to stop wavering in becoming. Because after silence and obedience, there is one final gift waiting for us. Kierkegaard says obedience is an all-or-nothing attitude. His famous either-or in philosophical works. We have only one choice. Choose between God and mammon, or for the protagonist of our Meaning Creation series. Choose between strictly living by this set of values you created and anything else. Any compromise, any half measures. If you allow yourself to lower standards, yield to temptation, or make excuses, that means you are trying to serve two masters. You cannot split time into sometimes caring about your values and sometimes not caring. Kierkegaard suggests you should keep things as simple as possible. More moving parts only means more places where things can go wrong. More places where things can go wrong means more thinking. which in turn means more temptation and doubt. For Kierkegaard, this only puts you at higher risk, falling into that slow decay process, which is the metaphor of you hitting the snooze alarm 12 times a day. Silence might be the skill to remind us of our values, but obedience is the skill to keep us living by these values. Now you might say to Kierkegaard, okay, I see what you mean. Serving multiple different masters might be unwise. But I have to admit, there are so many different masters out there to serve. There are so many different value systems I could potentially apply to myself. How can I realistically choose any one of them with any level of certainty? He would answer that you cannot. This is the protagonist of our series. The only way to create a set of values and obediently commit to them and remain silent before them is to make a radical choice based on uncertainty. Kierkegaard calls this in his language a leap of faith. Someone described it this way. For Kierkegaard, a leap of faith is not a noun. It is not some belief you hold, despite evidence to the contrary. Its sole purpose seems to be letting you bring a plate of cookies to fellowship every week. That is not what Kierkegaard is interested in. For Kierkegaard, a leap of faith is more like a verb. He is more interested in understanding the individual and the developing relationship between that individual and the unknown. Generally speaking, you cannot never know what the world has in store for you in the future. So if you ever commit to anything, whether values, bank loans, or relationships, you must commit to it, not knowing what the destination will be. In this process, doubt, temptation, worry, all these things will appear. Yet to commit to anything meaningful, for any sustained duration, requires you to keep moving forward, believing you made the right decision. When you throw yourself into everything you commit to, you cannot be omniscient. In fact, for Kierkegaard, taking this leap of faith seems to be the only rational solution to resolve that state of constant melancholy in which people otherwise live when they don't have a set of committed values. The example he gives is, only through unconditional obedience can one understand that what the gospel says is true. In other words, imagine going to church for the first time. That is your first day. They won't let you sit down and say, okay, thanks for coming. Any questions about the Lord? No. This is not a 3-day seminar with a buffet. They won't alleviate all your doubts like a timesheet presentation. It doesn't work like that. You live out the gospel. Then in the process of living out the gospel, doubts will arise. Temptation will arise. You won't always fully understand why you are doing what you are doing. But by living out the gospel, answers and truth will reveal themselves to you. I read an example. They were talking about a lake. Scientists can examine that lake. They can tell you all sorts of things: temperature, volume, density, mercury levels. They can tell you if this lake has COVID. But from the perspective of an individual, there is a completely different type of human understanding of that lake. That is jumping into the lake and swimming. The point is, once you created a value system, this becomes irrelevant. No matter how much knowledge you possess about the world, or how many contingencies you plan for the future, at some point for Kierkegaard, you must make a radical choice to commit. Remain obedient to the cause, and accept the fact that you have to learn as you go. Just like Socrates searching for truth in the Athenian marketplace, he had to believe truth was attainable. He didn't know if he would get there. Even if he found it, he didn't know what truth would look like. But nonetheless, he dedicated himself to the pursuit of finding it every day, putting in the work, obedient to the cause. Silence and obedience are the skills explored in the first two discourses. In the third and final discourse, Kierkegaard uses the lily and the bird as examples to teach us the value of living with joy. Where does this come from? Well, even if you learn to effectively use the skill of silence, even if you are using the skill of obedience to maintain commitment to the value system you created, there is still a feeling. Even if you do this, you might spend every day of your life in a state of dissatisfaction, boiling in your own soup. Joy becomes the antidote to this discomfort. This discomfort might destroy our ability to execute our values. Kierkegaard makes this very simple. He lists exactly what he means by possessing the skill of joy. He says, what is joy, or what is joyful? To be present is joy. To be truly present to oneself in this today is joy. Joy is the time of now. The whole emphasis falls on the present time. Without the context of the rest of the discourses, this certainly reads a bit cryptic. But you can undoubtedly see the present moment seems to be a quite important part. But why? Maybe a good start is to offer an example. The example about the lily. The real question: when a lily blooms, would you say that is the end of its growth process, or the beginning of its decay process? This flower, is it the culmination or climax of the lily's life? Or is it a harbinger that its best days are past? Kierkegaard thinks this question has no answer. The follow-up question is, does the lily care that it cannot answer that question? No matter where the lily is in its life cycle, does this change how it feels about the way it grows? No. The lily feels nothing about this. The lily doesn't waste time thinking about things like that. It is here in this present moment, too busy, just becoming what it was designed to be. Think about the metaphorical blooming in our lives. Many people spend a lifetime anticipating or looking back at their so-called blooming period. 2 years from now, I'll be in a good spot. Now is the grind for my values. 10 years ago, I had my whole life ahead of me. From now on, I'm forever just a downgraded version of that person. All this is noise. Because for Kierkegaard, all this is viewed through that desire-striving, project-oriented mindset, that lens belonging to the realm of human concern. But when you are present to yourself in this present moment, as Kierkegaard says, when you become what you were designed to be, that feeling of dissatisfaction starts to slip away. Because the whole question of why or when starts to slip away. Now maybe you are thinking designed to be. Well, we weren't designed to be anything. Yes, on the level of objectivity maybe so. But for the protagonist of our meaning creation, you just designed a set of values you want to live by. There is joy to be found every day. Just locking into becoming what you were designed to be. Just like the lily. Not thinking about your actions based on how it connects to some project or something you want. Not thinking about some reward you will get if you live by your values. There is joy to be found merely in that existence itself. Enjoying the periods of growth, decay, and blooming. This is enjoying them as they are. This is a different way of looking at ourselves. Kierkegaard calls this seeing ourselves through God's eyes. But regardless of his language, he asks a very enlightening question. Why does the lily bloom? Or why does the lily do anything? Of course, there are scientific answers to this question. But on an ontological level, the answer can ultimately only be because doing this is what a lily does. It doesn't bloom so it can sell flowers at the farmer's market. It doesn't bloom to prove the haters wrong. It blooms because it was designed that way. It is living. Living according to the values that gave it life. Kierkegaard believes mere joy can be found at that point. In that place, the question of why regarding an action starts to become less and less important. The things we do in the name of our value system are no longer means in the story of some project in the world. Our actions start to resemble more the growth of the lily or the flight of the bird. Silence, obedience, and joy. 3 skills that might help you not to fall into many traps. Traps that prevent people from living in the meaning they created. But someone might play devil's advocate here. They might offer a critique. Silence, obedience, joy. Yeah, I know. Some people are really good at these skills. Cult members or people trapped in terrible career situations, or people in bad relationships. Can't it be said that being good at these skills also makes you very good at blindly adhering to any conditions, no matter how toxic they are? Just keeping silent, obedient, and feeling joyful about it. Smile more. That's your problem. You got to smile more. I think Kierkegaard would agree. I also think he would say to our protagonist, this is truly a fantastic reminder, reminding us why it is so important to be vigilant when creating your value system and making it something you set aside time to visit often. In the lily of the field and the bird of the air, Kierkegaard is not saying we should reject the realm of human concern. He isn't saying you are a bad person because you desire to do projects, compare, strategize, or be tempted to do other things. He isn't saying you should try to live your life and always be in the present moment. It's not even clear he thinks something like that is even possible. But what he is saying is, there's an undeniable part of your existence located outside this place where we spend 99% of the time in our heads comparing things. Anyone truly committed to living in a set of values, if they can leave a little more space in their lives for this part of existence, for the part occupied by the lily and the bird, that is good. It turns out we can learn a lot from these 2 creatures. These 2 creatures have learned to live without why. In this world of freedom full of dizziness, maybe this is where we can find the most solid ground. Thank you everyone for listening. Please like and subscribe to support my channel. I am Raymond Shadow. See you next time.